the first expedition. It was on the 93rd day of the season of Goldleaf that the high conclave of scholars gathered in the vaulted crystal halls of Altharion. The air was cool with the scent of moon lilies drifting in from the open arches, and the silvery light of the sun filtered through enchanted glass, bathing the assembly in a serene glow. There was nothing serene, however, about the subject they had come to discuss. On a dais in the center of the council stood High Scholar Elorwyn, her long robes rippling faintly with woven spells of preservation. In her hands, she clutched a scroll sealed with black wax, a seal none present had seen in more than 5 centuries. She looked over the gathered faces, wise, immortal, and unshaken by most of the world's horrors. And yet, at the sight of that seal, many shifted uneasily. "We have received a message," she began, her voice echoing softly in the vast chamber. "From the expedition sent into the human lands." A low murmur swept the room. The human lands. A phrase spoken in Elven halls with the same intonation one might use for blighted swamp or graveyard. None of the younger elves knew the region well. They had grown up in an age when no contact was kept with the humans beyond the distant watchforts on the border. Trade was rare, treaties rarer still. It was said the last full delegation had gone there in the age of the burning sky, and not all had returned. Elorwyn broke the seal. The black wax cracked like a bone. The parchment within was not ordinary vellum, but something more sinister. The surface was dark, almost charred, as if it had been pulled from fire yet remained miraculously whole. Strange stains marred the edges, and the ink seemed to bleed into the page in deep crimson strokes. The hall was utterly silent as she read. "To the high conclave of Altharion, if this reaches you, know that I, Scholar Thandril of the 3rd expedition, write from the heart of the human realm. We came seeking knowledge, to verify if the stories of their land were truth or exaggerated fable. I tell you now, the stories are not only true, they are pale shadows of the reality we have found. The humans do not live in lands, they endure them. We have walked through forests that kill silently in the night, rivers that eat away the flesh as fast as water quenches thirst, plains where invisible predators stalk the unwary. Yet they thrive here. They build their homes in the very shadow of these terrors, as though danger is a companion they greet each morning. The Deathrealm is not a title given in mockery, but in awe. I will write again if I can. Thandril." By the time she finished, the chamber was tense. The eldest among them, Lord Aradel, whose memory stretched back to the time of the first pacts with humanity, leaned forward. "This is only one letter," he said. "Half a truth. What more was sent?" Elorwyn hesitated. This was the only letter, and it came without the expedition's return. Her words landed like a hammer blow. A forbidden curiosity. The Deathrealm. That was what humans called home? In Elven archives, the term was used as a curiosity, a half-poetic name recorded in ancient treaties. But few had asked why, fewer still had dared to investigate. In their arrogance, elves had assumed it was an embellishment. After all, humans were short-lived, fragile things, compared to the long-lived perfection of elvenkind. But now the question could no longer be ignored. The conclave debated for hours. Some argued the letter was a fabrication, a trick designed to elevate the reputation of a lesser race. Others pointed to older records, hushed mentions of night beasts, flesh storms, and iron skies encountered by scouts who had ventured too far into the human realm. By the 4th hour, the debate shifted to action. "Send another expedition," said Aradel. The words rippled through the room like a crack in glass. Another expedition. Into their lands. Into the Deathrealm. The journey begins. 2 weeks later, 5 scholars and their guards departed Altharion under a moonless sky. Among them was Scholar Varian, the youngest member of the party, though still well over a century old. His hunger for forbidden knowledge was matched only by his arrogance. The journey took them across the emerald hills of the borderlands, where the air still tasted of elven magic. But soon the hills gave way to harsher terrain. The forests thickened, the light dimmed, and the air grew heavy with scents they could not name. On the 7th day they reached the River Thorn, the natural border between elven and human lands. Its waters were black and slow-moving, reflecting the pale sky like a sheet of obsidian. Crossing it was more than a physical act. It was stepping into a different world. On the far bank, the air felt heavier, older. The land seemed to watch them. First signs of the Deathrealm. The first village they encountered should not have existed. It was built on the edge of a swamp so thick the ground itself gurgled. Great wooden stakes held the homes above the muck, and rope bridges swayed in the wind. Children ran barefoot across the slick planks, laughing, as massive eel-like creatures thrashed in the black water below. One of the humans, seeing their stares, grinned. "Don't worry," he said. "The swamp worms don't jump higher than the knees." To the elves, this was madness. No one would live here. No one would choose to live here. Yet these people did and looked healthy, strong. Their skin bore scars, their hands calluses, and their eyes burned with something the elves could not name. They stayed only long enough to buy supplies. The humans sold them dried meat, water sealed in clay jars, and a strange powder they insisted was swamp bite cure. When Varian asked if the swamp was their greatest danger, the human vendor laughed until tears rolled down his cheeks. "The swamp?" he wheezed. "That's just the gatekeeper. Into the wilds." Beyond the village, the wilds grew stranger still. They passed forests where the trees bled thick amber when cut. Amber that attracted clouds of glowing insects the size of a man's fist. They saw plains where the ground seemed to breathe, swelling and sinking in slow rhythm, and something vast moved beneath it. One night, they camped on a rocky rise and watched lightning strike the same spot on the horizon over and over. In the morning, when they approached the place, they found the ground scorched into glass, and a charred carcass of a beast unlike any recorded in Elven lore. And through it all, they saw human settlements, sometimes no more than a cluster of huts, other times sprawling wooden forts, always in places where death loomed close, always with the same strange, fierce resilience. The first loss. On the 12th day, they lost one of the guards. It happened near a canyon where the wind screamed through jagged stone. One moment, the guard walked at the rear of the column. The next, something black and fast swept down from above. There was no scream, no struggle, only a blur, and the man was gone. They searched the canyon floor for hours, but found only a single boot, and deep gouges in the stone where something massive had landed. The humans who found them searching shook their heads. "You camped near a windreaper's nest," one said. "Lucky it only took one." The elves did not feel lucky. The truth takes shape. By the time they reached the second major human settlement, Varian had begun to understand why their people called this place the Deathrealm. Into the Deathrealm. The forest had been thinning for hours, its ancient trees giving way to shorter, crooked pines that leaned as if fleeing from something ahead. By the time we reached the edge of the Elven border watch, the air had changed. It was heavier, thicker, as if the very wind carried the memory of violence. The captain of the border guard, an older elf named Serathil, met us with an expression that belonged on someone who had already buried too many friends. "You're certain you wish to cross?" he asked, eyes flicking between me and Lyriel, the young scholar who carried a satchel full of ink-stained notes about human culture. "Few return, and those that do are never the same." I expected Lyriel to falter, but she squared her shoulders. "The High Council demands first-hand research, Captain. If we are to speak of humans in our archives, we should speak truth." Serathil's lips tightened. "Truth is not what you'll find there. Only survival or death." He gestured toward the faint shimmer in the air beyond the border. It was not a magical barrier, but something subtler. The change in the light, the dulling of birdsong, the smell of iron drifting faintly from the east. The Deathrealm. I had read about the great human wars, of course. Every elf of my generation had. But reading was one thing. Walking into the land that birthed them was another. The histories always made it sound as though the humans were gone now, faded into scattered tribes and small settlements. Yet the Elven term for their homeland had not softened over centuries. It was still the Deathrealm. That alone told me enough. We stepped across. The difference was instant. It was not that the land itself looked monstrous. There were still hills, streams, and grass, but everything seemed scarred. The grass grew in uneven patches, as if the soil still remembered where fire had fallen. Stones bore strange black streaks, not from lichen but from something molten that had once run across them. And there was silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the absence that comes after too many things have learned to stay quiet. Lyriel whispered, "It feels wrong. It feels lived in," I replied softly, "by something that doesn't want to be found." We followed an old road half swallowed by weeds. The pitted stones suggested human hands had built it once, but centuries of neglect had left it crooked and cracked. I traced my fingers along a rut in the stone. Not from cart wheels, but something heavier, sharper, dragging itself forward. "War machines," Lyriel murmured, reading my thoughts. She began scribbling in her notes. The pressure scoring suggests iron constructs at least 10 tons in weight. The human's capacity for metalcraft far exceeded ours, even before the wars. "And yet," I said, "none remain. That you can see." Seraphil's warning echoed in my head. By midday we came across our first structure, or what was left of it. It had been a fortress, but unlike the spired, elegant strongholds of elves, this was squat and brutal. A block of blackened stone, every inch built for war. Arrow slits gaped like wounds, and its gate had been torn completely off, lying half-buried in the mud some 50 paces away. We approached cautiously. My every instinct told me to stay outside, but Lyriel insisted on entering. "Evidence," she said simply, pushing through the dark archway. Inside, the air was colder. The walls bore deep gouges, marks from weapons I didn't recognize. In one corner, a collapsed stairwell led to a room half filled with water. I thought it empty until I saw the bones. Not Elven, not Orcish, human. The skeleton was massive, not in height but in density. The ribcage was thick, the jaw wide, the teeth worn blunt from years of use. Beside the bones lay a weapon. A simple steel blade, nearly as long as my arm, still faintly glinting under layers of rust. Lyriel stared. "They fought here, and they lost." "Against what?" She didn't answer. That night we camped far from the fortress. Lyriel sketched by firelight, muttering observations about bone density, weapon balance, and patterns of adaptive warfare. I tried to sleep, but the forest here was different. The pines leaned at odd angles, their branches creaking even when the wind was still. And beneath that sound, something else. Footsteps? No, more like the faint clink of metal shifting in the dark. I sat up, hand on my dagger. "Lyriel," I whispered. She looked up, her face pale in the fire's glow. "You hear it too." The noise came closer, a slow, deliberate sound, like a man in armor, dragging something heavy behind him. I rose to my feet. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows into the trees. Then the sound stopped. For a long, breathless moment, there was nothing. No wind, no creak of branches, only the heat of the fire and the cold awareness of being watched. And then, a voice. It was low, gravelly, and carried an accent unlike any I had heard from human traders in the border markets. "You are far from home, elf." Lyriel froze. "Who's there?" From the shadows stepped a man, or what remained of one. He wore pieces of armor, rusted, mismatched, and scarred with burns, but his frame was enormous. His face was gaunt, the skin weathered like old leather, but his eyes, they burned. Not with rage, but with a terrible, unbroken will. In his hand was a weapon I had only seen in illustrations. A human war axe, its head chipped but still deadly. "This is the Deathrealm," he said, stepping closer, the firelight catching on the edge of his blade. "And you're trespassing." Lyriel stammered. We mean no harm. We're scholars. We only came to learn." His eyes narrowed. "Scholars? You think you can study this land? Measure its graves? Draw its bones in your pretty little books? We just want the truth," I said. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Truth? Then here it is, your kind left when the sky burned. We stayed. We buried our dead in soil still smoking from war. We drank water fouled with ash. And we fought, not for glory, not for kings, but because stopping meant extinction. His gaze swept over us. You call it the Deathrealm. We call it home. The man, who called himself Garen, did not kill us. Instead, he told us to follow him. We hesitated, but Lyriel whispered, "This could be the primary source material of the century." I sighed. Or our last mistake. He led us off the road, through brambles and into a low valley where the air was cooler. As we descended, I saw shapes in the shadows, metal, glinting faintly. At first I thought they were ruins, but then one shifted. War machines. Dozens of them, their massive frames slumbering like beasts. Some were missing limbs, others were scorched black, but all of them bore the same human craftsmanship we had seen on the fortress gate. "These," Garen said, "are the last of them, the Deathrealm's teeth." "Why keep them here?" I asked. "Because the war isn't over," he said simply. "It never ended. The enemies just learned to wait." He stopped and looked straight at Lyriel. "You came for truth, elf. Here it is. This land earns its name not because it kills those who enter, but because those who live here have already died once, and they do not fear dying again." Lyriel's hand trembled as she wrote, "The council will never believe this." "They will," I said quietly, "because we're not leaving until we understand all of it." Garen's eyes gleamed in the firelight of the camp he lit for us. "Then you'll need to learn fast," he said, "because the Deathrealm doesn't wait for anyone." The Bloodwood Path. The Bloodwood was unlike any forest the elves had charted before, though they had tried. The earliest accounts were etched in trembling ink, describing it as a place where roots drink more than water. Those who ventured inside rarely returned, and the few who did spoke with cracked voices and eyes that never met another's gaze. Serenia stood before its shadowed border, her silver hair catching the faint light like a blade's edge. The air here was wrong. Too still, too thick, as if the forest were holding its breath. Behind her, two mounted elves shifted uneasily, their steeds stamping against the damp earth. "Even the animals know," murmured Valor, tightening his grip on his bow. "This place is not meant for the living." "That's what they said about the Hollow Marsh," Serenia replied, stepping forward. "And yet we crossed it." "This is not the Hollow Marsh," Valor said, glancing toward the jagged treeline. "This is Deathrealm itself." The first step into the Bloodwood felt like plunging into cold water. The air grew dense, heavy, and every sound seemed to die before it could echo. Branches arched overhead, their leaves the deep maroon of spilled wine. The trunks were blackened, not by fire but by something older, more deliberate. The ground was soft beneath their boots, sinking slightly with each step. It was not mud. Serenia tried not to think about what it might be. "Mark the path," she ordered. One of the scouts scratched a symbol into a tree trunk with his dagger. The wood bled, not sap blood. Thick, dark, and sluggish. The dagger slipped from his hand, clattering to the ground as he stumbled back. "It's alive," he whispered. "The forest is alive." "Stay calm," Serenia said, though her own stomach tightened. "This is still just earth and wood." But it wasn't. Hours passed in uneasy silence. No birdsong, no insect hum, just the faint rustle of leaves that seemed to shift without wind. The deeper they went, the more twisted the trees became, their roots coiling above ground like serpents. Valor was the first to see it. Serenia, up ahead. At first she thought it was a tree, massive and hollow, its bark peeling in great curling sheets. But as they drew closer, she saw the truth: armor. Rusted plate fused into the wood, the remnants of a human knight's corpse half swallowed by the trunk. The helmet's visor was open. Inside, a skull grinned, teeth slick with the red sap that seeped from the bark. One of the scouts whispered a prayer in Elvish. "Don't stop," Serenia ordered. "We can't afford to lose daylight." But daylight was a lie here. The deeper they went, the less the sun seemed to matter. They reached the first clearing by mid-afternoon, or what they thought was mid-afternoon. The forest floor here was littered with weapons. Swords, axes, broken spears. Most were rusted beyond use, their hilts wrapped in something that looked disturbingly like human sinew. At the center of the clearing stood a mound of earth, overgrown with crimson moss. Serena's instincts screamed to keep moving, but her scholar's curiosity pinned her feet. "Help me clear this," she said. Two elves stepped forward reluctantly. Together, they scraped away the moss, revealing stone beneath, engraved stone. It was a marker, a headstone of sorts. The inscription was in an old human dialect, the words weathered but still legible. "Here lies Eric Thornsbane. He kept the path closed." Serena frowned. Kept the path closed? Against what? Before anyone could answer, the ground beneath the stone trembled. Roots burst upward like striking snakes, wrapping around one of the scouts and dragging him toward the mound. His scream tore through the clearing, but was cut short as the roots pierced his armor, pumping something dark and viscous into his body. Valor loosed an arrow. It struck one of the roots, but the wood split open to reveal muscle-like fibers beneath, snapping the shaft in two. "Back!" Serena shouted. They retreated into the tree-line, the mound pulsing as if it had a heartbeat. Behind them, the weapons littering the ground began to sink slowly into the soil, swallowed whole. They did not stop running until their lungs burned. Serena forced herself to think clearly. Panic was as deadly here as any beast. "This path leads to Black Hollow," she said between breaths. "If the humans marked it, they must have used it. And abandoned it for a reason," Valor replied sharply. "You saw what that forest did to Eric's grave." She did, and yet turning back was not an option. Every record they had gathered pointed toward the Bloodwood as the quickest route through the Deathrealm. The question was whether they could survive it. By nightfall, if it could be called that, they found shelter beneath a half-collapsed watchtower, its stones etched with strange grooves. Serena traced one with her fingertips, feeling the faint hum of magic. "This is human warding," she said. "Old magic, a very old." "Then why is the forest still here?" "Because something stronger wanted it to be." Her words hung in the damp air, and no one spoke again until they slept. The dreams came for all of them. Serena dreamt she was standing in the same clearing they had fled. Only this time the mound was split open. A figure stood within, tall, armored, helm shadowing its face. "You trespass," it said, its voice like roots breaking stone. "The path is sealed for a reason." When she tried to speak, her mouth filled with sap. She woke choking, gasping for air, her hands slick with red. Valor was already awake, his eyes wild. "We leave at first light," he said. "If there is light." Serena said nothing, but deep down she knew. They were already too far in. The Bloodwood did not let go of what it had claimed. The Deathrealm's true name. The rain came without warning. It hammered the charred ruins of Elender's forward camp, soaking ash into black rivulets that streaked across broken shields and shattered helmets. The wind tore through the skeletal remains of trees, whistling low and mournful like the breath of some ancient, unseen predator. Elender stood motionless in the center of the destruction. His hands trembling despite the cold iron grip he tried to keep on himself. Every instinct told him to flee, leave this cursed realm and never look back. But there was no path forward, and retreat meant death. Behind him, the remnants of his escort were little more than shadows hunched in the rain. Once 50 strong, now barely a dozen. The rest were gone, swallowed by forests that moved like predators, drowned in rivers that pulled them under with unseen hands, or simply vanished in the night without a trace. The Deathrealm had claimed them without ever showing its full face. "Scholar," said Serendil, his voice hoarse. "The path west is blocked. The bridge over the Vaith collapsed. We'll need to find another way." Elender turned, rain running down his pale cheeks. "Another way?" His voice was quieter than the storm, but there was an edge in it. "Do you truly believe such a thing exists here?" "We are being herded, Serendil. The land itself drives us toward something." The veteran's jaw tightened. "Then perhaps it's time we make our stand. This wandering will kill us before the humans ever touch us." At the word humans, the camp seemed to stiffen, even those who had never seen one. Elender knew why. The name was whispered among elves not as a race but as a force, an old, hungry thing that the forests of their youth had never known. And yet, they were the reason he had come. The scholar crouched in the mud, unrolling the last intact map, a tattered scrap he had taken from the archives before his journey. The borders of human lands were drawn in broad, almost careless strokes, as though the cartographer had feared going into detail. There were no roads marked, no cities named, only a single word stretched across the central expanse. Deathrealm. I must know why they call it this, Elender murmured to himself. You already do, Sarandil said grimly. You've seen it. Elender shook his head. No, I have seen shadows of it. This name was not given for rivers that drown and forests that hunt. It was given for something deeper, something older. He touched a mark on the map, a small circle at the center of the realm. Here, whatever truth lies in these lands, it is here. Took them 2 days to reach the circle. The journey was like walking through the open mouth of a beast. Trees arched overhead, their trunks twisted into unnatural curves. Sometimes Elender thought he heard whispering, soft, wordless, and close enough to be behind him, only to turn and see nothing but mist curling between the roots. The last night before they arrived, the mist became so thick they could barely see their own hands. The fire burned strangely, its smoke sinking instead of rising, curling down into the soil as though the ground itself was drinking it in. Elender did not sleep. Something in the dark was watching. When the mists finally broke at dawn, the world beyond was not a forest at all. It was a clearing so vast it could have swallowed an elven city. And in the center stood ruins. Not human ruins. Something older. The stone was black, carved with symbols Elender had only seen once before, in the deepest vaults of the royal library, locked behind iron gates. They were glyphs of war. Not elven, not dwarven, not any of the free races. They belonged to an age before the first songs, when beings not bound by mortality shaped the world. And there, standing at the base of the largest monolith, was a man. He was dressed simply, in a long coat the color of storm clouds, his hair wet from the rain. He did not flinch when Elender's party emerged from the treeline. "Scholar," the man said, his voice carrying across the open ground. "You've come far." Elender froze. "You speak our tongue?" "I speak all tongues," the man replied. "A courtesy we learned when the Deathrealm was young." The elves exchanged uneasy glances. Elender stepped forward. "You know why I'm here." The man's lips curved in a faint, humorless smile. "Every elf who enters this land comes seeking the same thing. They want to know why we are feared, why your people whisper Deathrealm as though it is a curse. And," Elender's voice was tight, the human's gaze hardened, "because this land remembers what your kind has forgotten. It remembers the first war. Not the little border skirmishes you sing about, but the war that almost unmade the world. And it remembers who ended it." Elender's throat went dry. The human stepped aside, gesturing to the monolith. "These stones are not graves. They are locks. When the enemy came from the dark between the stars, no sword, no spell, no divine hand could stop them. They could not be killed, only imprisoned. So we built the Deathrealm as their cage." Sarandil shifted uncomfortably. "We? Your people were barely..." The man's eyes flashed. "My people were chosen because no other race would bear it. We bound them here, in chains of earth and blood. We became the wardens of a prison no one else dared guard." Elender felt the wind shift. It was colder now. The human's voice dropped to something like a whisper, though it still carried through the clearing. "The rivers that drown you, the forests that hunt you, the storms that tear down your camps, they are not curses. They are the locks. This land will kill anything that threatens to break them." Elender took an involuntary step back. "Then why let me come here at all?" The man studied him for a long, unreadable moment. "Because the locks are failing. And when they do, this will no longer be the Deathrealm, it will be the Deathworld. And it will not stop at your borders." Lightning flashed in the distance. "Go back to your people, scholar," the man said. "Tell them the name you feared was only half the truth. Elender swallowed, his voice barely audible. And the other half? The man's eyes were like storm clouds over a black sea. This realm was never meant to keep you out, he said. It was meant to keep them in. When they left the clearing, Elender did not look back. He knew if he did, the man would no longer be standing there. And in his place, something far older would be watching him go. The Deathrealm had a heartbeat now in his mind. Slow, patient, and waiting. He would return to the Elven capital, carrying a warning that no one would want to believe. But they would believe, because when the locks broke, the Deathrealm's prisoners would come walking. And the humans, those strange, terrifying wardens, would open the gates themselves.